It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to the first programme in August. And we're always going on about it being packed and full of interesting people and all that stuff, but it actually is. We're telling the truth. And we're going to be highlighting a few key female contributors this month, which delights me a lot, and I'm sure it delights Kate a lot. So, Kate, tell us a little bit about who we've got on the show.
Of course. So Christine Locker is talking to us about her book, about values-based coaching, amongst other things. We've got Laura Overton and Vivian Heinen talking about their new venture. And Georgia Blundell is one of the Learning Technologies 30 under 30. So continuing our interviews with some of these fantastic, bright young talents that fill me with hope for the future.
That's great. Well, we're both going to enjoy the show, aren't we? Tulsa was launched recently, and I am so fortunate in that I've got two of the major people behind Tulsa to speak with me this morning. So welcome, Laura Overton, welcome Vivian Heinen, and I'd like you just to introduce yourselves. Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself. People know who you are, but I would like you to just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm Laura Overton, and I've spent the last 35 years in the learning technology industry, but I think the key thing for me that's held my passion for all of that time is the fact that learning innovation can deliver real business value. And probably most people around now will know me from my work of running a 15-year longitudinal study with Towards Maturity, all about how learning innovation can deliver business results. So that's who I am.
So you're kind of moving from Laura giving us the data to Laura actually putting the data into effect, in a sense, using the data to do something to organizations.
Well, I think the data showed us that there was a new hope for our industry. And it's now about how do we actually realize that hope and realize the business critical value. And there are lots of different ways, and that's why it's so great to join up with the others on the team.
Yeah. Vivian.
Hi, I'm Vivian indeed. I'm working, I think, for already 20 plus years also in the field, both in internal roles like an internal L&D consultant, a Royal Air Forces, a large hospital, and then also as an external consultant, and first actually in a training firm, and then we went whole to the transformation also to a more, consulting firm in terms of what could you do else besides formal learning solutions. So actually I've been through the whole journey myself with all the emotions, results, mistakes, everything. And I pretty much saw a lot of organizations from inside and outside.
Vivian, you with people know you from the 70-20-10 Institute. Yes. So how does your work differ from what you did do or continue to do with the 70-10-20-10 Institute and what you would do with Tulsa, your new organization?
Well, actually, we are still continuing the work we did at the 70-20-10 Institute. The thing is that we were already thinking, maybe for 2 years, about a new name, because the 70-20-10 Institute wasn't enough to show what we actually did. So it was too narrow to determine what we really could add for our clients. So we were already thinking about that. And then when we asked Laura to join us, that was a really good moment to change to another name. So that was also the reason why we took Tulsa, because that's an anagram of result. And that makes sense, I think, actually to everyone. but also to us, and because we could go beyond the 7-20-10 approach.
Yeah, so bringing Laura in was kind of the excuse to refocus, reformat, rebrand, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So Laura, let me ask you, what are you going to do in your first year at Tulsa? What do you hope is going to happen that will be really powerful for you and make you feel I made the best decision of my life?
I already think I've made the best decision of my life. Clearly, that's a fact. But no, I think what's really powerful that holds us together and also holds the people together that have already responded to the new name change is that we believe that learning should become business critical. More so now than ever. We started this conversation to come together way before, actually, at the end of last year, before the COVID situation had hit us. But even now, we believe that learning and development needs to become business critical. But my own research, my conversations with people, together with the experience of the team working originally under 70-20-10 Institute, said that business critical learning is not about individual interventions, however fabulous they may be. It's about really a systemic change in an organization. And I think you'll start to see us unpicking that. We're already working with organizations one step at a time to say, okay, what does that systemic change look like? And the thing that I was so excited about was that the team already had a series of processes, of methodologies in which to experiment and guide people through change in an organization, starting one step at a time. So you will start to see that. And I think the other thing that you'll see as well is four of us recognized that we may have been in this space for a long time, but we realized that we need to continually learn. And as a team, we want to continually learn, to continually experiment, to continually surface what is working in new ways. And so you'll also start to see us working together, pulling together a collaboration, a connection, an alliance, and shaping that up, because it's systemic change. Business critical learning and development is more than one organization.
Yes.
And we want to pull that together and to be able to share and surface the things that are working in organizations.
Okay, Vivian, do you think that learning is just a core part of what you do? It's not the whole of the operation. You're actually going to start to focus on much broader business issues. So if you, in a way, you start backwards. You start with results and you work back to how you need to change the organization to deliver that. Is that a fair statement?
That's definitely a fair statement. Yes. We've been doing this for many years right now with really good results, to be honest. And what that means is indeed that learning is still a very main focus, actually, but it goes much further than formal learning. It's also about, of course, the whole social learning piece, but informal, but also organizational learning, which is really interesting. And that means that you also, as a learning and development departments, for instance, have to collaborate with others because you can't do it on your own anymore. And indeed, we are addressing real business issues. So it's not only HR business issues, because that's interesting. When we ask or talk with people, they almost always mention things like HR critical issues, which of course is also really interesting and good to do something with that. But we are really working on critical business issues and the core processes of organizations.
Yes. So let me ask you just a final question, Vivian. If I'm sitting across the table from you, I'm very interested in all the things that you've said. What are the 2 or 3 key messages you would give me that will differentiate what you can offer as against many other organizations who claim to be able to do the same thing? What is your unique selling point?
Most importantly, we don't only talk about it, but we do it. And I think that not a lot of people know that. So we bring messages into our field and through social media and books and so on. But we also do what's in those messages. So that means that we really work with organizations, and we do not only talk about business results, but we are going to just take them one by one and see how we can do something with that. And then what is also really unique is that we work in a very structured methodological way. That means that if we don't know beforehand that we can add value together with you, then we don't even start. And this is a true story. So we first determine what can we add, but what you can add, and what results we can achieve within the core businesses. And that's, I think, most importantly, what is very unique about us and working with our clients.
Yeah, thank you. Laura, I'll ask you, for you, what will success look like? So let's go 6 months, 9 months, a year down the track. What will success look like?
Well, I think you'll already start to see in 6 months that we'll be bringing fresh thinking to the marketplace. We're already surfacing new approaches and new ideas just through the conversations that we're having with the wider community right now. But what's more, Jos Arets is working on bringing that together with some completely brand new ideas about new business models for learning, which again, we're testing out and we're working with the community. So you'll see fresh thinking. I think you'll also see, hopefully, some educated and intelligent conversation that is going on in the marketplace, that we will be encouraging debate and encouraging people to maybe question, because I think the work that both of Charles Jennings, you know, from Tulsa as well, Jos, Vivian and I have always been doing is holding a mirror up to the industry to say, is this the best we can be, and where else can we go? So we want to get some educated conversation going as well, and you'll also see some practical how-tos too.
And I would also imagine that part of the joy of Tulsa, in a way, is the fact that it's 4 brains at work, 4 equal brains. There's no hierarchy. There's not an MD and then a junior marketing. It's the 4 brains working together. And that should engender in itself new ideas, new responses. So it's been such a delight talking to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you so much, Laura. And I really wish you luck. And we'll come back maybe in 6 months' time, and I'll hold you to the fire. We'll see whether all the things that you've said today actually materialize in practice. I sincerely hope they do. So thank you very much, and all the best for Tulsa going forward.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
As ever, Learning Now TV's contributor Robin Hoyle continues his series with us. This month he's looking at learning analytics. Really important topic, comes out really highly rated in some of the skills, the LPI's capability map in terms of where we need to improve. And this month he's looking at what data we should be looking at and why.
As learning becomes more technology focused, simply because it has to, then it generates more data. And as soon as you start talking about technology and learning and data, you start talking about data analytics. And of course you would do, wouldn't you? Because of course there's lots more information available to people about what's going on as soon as you move to a primarily technology delivered mechanism of supporting learning for people within the workplace. But there are some challenges. So a couple of months ago, Nigel Payne on Learning Now TV was talking about the challenges of micromanagement. And one of the first things that happens once people start to gather all sorts of numbers about things perhaps that they don't necessarily understand, is we start to micromanage those numbers. And that, as Nigel said in that piece, is always bad. You know, micromanagement is never a good thing. So we've got to be careful that the data that we have doesn't encourage people to focus down on things which may or may not have any bearing on impact or performance. And of course, when we're talking about data, therefore, and analysing that data, we've got to think very hard about, well, what data do we analyse? Because a lot of the times learning technology platforms have borrowed their infrastructure from other disciplines, like marketing, for example, where counting the number of impressions, the number of people who have seen something matters a lot. But in learning and development, it doesn't matter quite so much, or certainly it doesn't really determine whether or not we've had any impact. So it's an insufficient measure for what we want to use. And then, of course, the other thing is, when we start talking about measures, is that it's not too long before somebody starts talking about targets. Part of that micromanagement as well. But of course, we need to be aware of Goodhart's law. And Goodhart was an economist, early part of the 20th century with the Bank of England. And Goodhart's law is that as soon as a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be an effective measure. Because, of course, what happens is people start trying to achieve that goal at the expense of other things. So we don't necessarily see all of the unintended consequences of focusing on this measure, which might be the number of people who've logged onto a particular platform, or accessed a particular piece of e-learning, or attended a particular Zoom conference. And actually what happens afterwards, what happens in the real world, when maybe it's a little bit more difficult to determine which numbers we should be looking at. And of course we could just go the whole hog and say, well look, we're not going to measure any of those analytics, we're just going to focus on the numbers which matter to the business. Because if they're important, they're already gathering the data about individuals' performance, the way that teams work, whether or not that's around customer satisfaction, customer response times, budget spent, whatever those numbers are that are important to the business, they're already gathering data. So let's just focus on those. But without understanding how we enable people to do things better, it's very difficult for us to be able to change what we're doing in learning and development to more effectively deliver those targets. So those measures are not unimportant, but they don't tell us how we should do things, just what. And we're interested in the how. So a couple of tips, really. I think the first is make sure you understand what data you have available, what it tells you, how you are going to report on it, before you start the learning intervention. You know, at some point, we've all been involved when a stakeholder comes back to us and say, right, well, I'd like to know whether or not this is working. And the only data we've got is who's completed which learning module. And we don't know whether or not that's changed their performance or anything because we didn't set up the process to gather data and to follow people through and to track them through. The second is avoid any data analytical bias. It's very, very easy to bring your own bias in to say, well, look, here's a set of numbers, and I'm going to choose those numbers which support my position, support my argument. And that's particularly true when we use survey tools as one of the ways of generating data, because it's very, very easy to misinterpret or overinterpret that data, particularly if we don't get absolutely 100% completion of the relevant questionnaire. Because as soon as we don't get everybody completing, we've got a self-selection process. Why did some people complete? Why did some people not complete? Does that tell us the whole story, the whole picture? Or does it give us a slightly skewed response to the questions that we asked? And there are all sorts of other challenges around how we set those questions up and what information it tells us. So we've got to be very clear about what the data is that we have available, how we're going to gather it, and what we expect it to tell us. What will it tell us is working or not working? What will it tell us we need to do more of or less of? What will it tell us we need to start doing and stop doing? And if we're very clear around those things early on within the process, then I think we can use data analytics to help us to give answers to the organisation about how we support performance, not just what performance we support.
Hi experiences unlock potential, transform the performance of people and organisations, and help millions around the world build happy and successful careers. We change lives with evidence-based learning that works, sparking real change for real impact.
I'm thrilled to welcome our next guest onto Learning Now television. Georgia Blundell is the Learning and Development Coordinator for Sea Salt Cornwall, not to be confused with Sea Salt Learning, which is a very different kind of company. These guys are a clothing retailer, and I'll let Georgia tell you all about that in just a moment. She's also one of the 2020 Learning Technologies 30 under 30. So we're going to delve into that as well. So Georgia, welcome to Learning Now TV.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So can we start with a little bit about what Sea Salt Cornwall does and your role? And I'd also love to unpack your story behind the 30 under 30 as well.
Yeah, of course. So Sea Salt is a Cornish lifestyle brand. It's based in Cornwall. We've got our head office in Falmouth and Redruth. So it started in 1981 in a small shop in Penzance, and it's a family-run business by the Chadwick family. So they started by supplying artists and fishermen, but we now have nearly 70 stores across the UK. We distribute internationally, and we've also just launched wholesale into the US as well, so it's a really exciting time. My role specifically as Learning and Development Coordinator, I look after the Sea Salt Academy, so that kind of comprises of our graduate scheme, internships, work experience and apprentices, which we've got nearly 20 apprentices throughout the business now. So for a company of 1,000 people, we're really proud of that, and they're all getting on really well working remotely as well.
So you've not been involved in learning and development for very long. It's about 18 months, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you went to university. What did you study at university?
Yes, I went to Swansea University and studied business management, and then kind of got the job at Sea Salt in recruitment, and then got the opportunity to start working in the learning and development team, and that's when the opportunity came up to apply for the 30 under 30 programme at the Learning Technologies Conference. So that was an amazing experience. It was a 2-day whirlwind, complete whirlwind, but I learned so much and met so many people as well. So I've now got a great network of not only like-minded individuals, but industry experts who are more than willing to help with any problems or challenges that you're facing. So I'd really recommend to anyone who's in the learning and development industry to apply.
Under 30, obviously. Sadly,
yeah.
I no longer can apply for that. So, and what's interesting as well is that you have far from rested on your laurels in terms of your ongoing personal development outside your role. You've really channeled what you took from the 30 under 30. So tell us a little bit about the LinkedIn group that you've set up.
Yeah, so I've started a LinkedIn group called Learning and Development for Beginners. So what I wanted to create this group because I really wanted a safe space for anyone that's entering the learning and development industry to be able to ask questions, find resources. We've got a reading list on there, so anyone that's starting out in the industry knows where they can really develop and expand their knowledge. So I feel like we've got not only people that are new to the industry, but industry experts within there. So we've had really great tips from people like Nigel Payne, Bob Mosher's filmed a video, we've had Laurie Niles Hoffman, and just everyone has been, I can't go on to say all the names because they've been amazing, but yeah, really, really good start. And we've already got 117 members, and the group has been running for a month. So
Wow.
we're really hoping to grow that even more and just have it as a space where people can help each other.
It's fun. I think it's fantastic, because I think that's, you know, that's what, for me, learning and development is all about. So obviously all friends of the show and our very own Nigel contributing. So I mean, I'm really pleased to hear that. But I genuinely think that if you can tap into that goodwill and that willingness to share that exists within the learning and development industry, then hopefully that's going to be a really great resource for you and your peers.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
And how are you, obviously it is a challenging time, and we have obviously been through lockdown, and we've talked a little bit about how that's affecting things like your grads and apprentices. It is really challenging to just be starting out and suddenly be working from home. So how are you guys coping with that at Sea Salt, and how is your kind of these side hustles, as I would call them, like the LinkedIn group and the 30 under 30, is that helping you kind of through this time?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of what I've learned from not only the conference, but what I've learned since, so reading books and resources, that's really helped to, so at the moment, for example, we are moving more of our learning for our people online because everyone is working remotely. So it's really taking what I've learned from the seminars and the reading and things like that and putting it into practice. So our CEO has been great throughout, I'd say, lockdown. We regularly received updates whether we were furloughed or not on the business's position. We then focused all our efforts on the distribution centre, because we actually closed all our shops before the government advice. So we wanted to make sure that we were putting the safety and health of our people and our customers first. So we closed all the shops, and then we focused on the distribution centre and making that a comfortable and safe environment for the people that were continuing to work there. So we put in things like hand sanitizers, face masks, we readjusted the working patterns and things like that. And now that we're reopening the shops, we had a phased reopening, and we've got quite a few measures in place there in terms of cleaning stations.
Can I ask about all of that? There's been a phrase thrown around a bit, and we've talked a bit about this at Fossway around reboarding. You know, how did you with all the changes that are obviously happening in the shops, how have you tackled that with your staff to make sure that they were ready? Is that all been done online?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, we launched with a company called Fuse, who was a perfect time to launch really for us, because a few months later, we obviously then went into lockdown. But reopening the shops, it's been a great asset to be able to communicate with everyone in the business. And we provided compulsory training for anyone returning to the stores as well as the office. So that would make sure that they knew how to act in store, what measures we put in place, how to use them effectively, how many people are allowed in the store at once and things like that, how often you're supposed to be washing your hands, quarantining returned items and things like that. So yeah, it's been a different experience having to, like you said, reboard people that way, but online has definitely been the most effective for us at the moment, and everyone in the business has really taken to using our online platform, and it's been a great way of communicating with everyone.
And are you using it as do you think that the comms element is almost as important as any of the e-learning or video type modules that you've used?
Definitely. I think For me, I've always said that communication is really important in teams as well as the whole business. So I think the fact that our CEO, Paul Hayes, and members of the board took the time to update the business on what was happening, where we were. We may not be in as good a position as we were last year, but what can we do to improve that, and what we're going to do moving forward? So yeah, it's been an absolute fantastic resource to be able to communicate with everyone effectively and keep everyone up to date.
And is that a big shift? Was the majority of your training beforehand done face to face?
Yeah, I'd say it was a kind of blended learning before. So we had face-to-face sessions, mainly for our leadership development. And then we had some online, online resources really. So now it's made a shift to more online, but I'd say we were quite a traditional company before, as in we, especially in head office, where we came into the office and we sat at our desks and we'd maybe have 1 or 2 days a week working from home. Whereas looking to the future now, we're looking at new ways of working. We've proven that we can successfully work from home. So it's now just looking at how we can do that even better moving forward, and what measures need to be put in place to make that a success, really.
And what do you see next? Because we're sort of going into this recovery mode. I mean, obviously nobody knows what's going to happen next, but as you say, you can sort of start to look ahead now. Do you see that you've kind of built a foundation that gives you a good platform for some more exciting stuff into 2021 and the future?
So yeah, I really think that learning shouldn't stop just because we are now working remotely. We've had a hard few months, but I'm really excited about welcoming our customers back to the shops, but also collaborating and working with our teams remotely to ensure that progression and the development in the teams continue.
I love what you said about, development shouldn't stop. And, there's no doubt that it is challenging when you're looking after people like graduates in this situation. It's not an easy thing to do, but I love that commitment is there. And I'm really excited. I think, all of the 30 under 30 that we've spoken to so far are just really inspiring. It gives me great hope for the future of learning and development. So Georgia, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you so much for having me.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
Do your meetings and events leave you feeling inspired and energized? They should do. Too often, though, they are dominated by one person, they're frustrating, you wonder why you're there. Discover liberating structures. These are more than 33 different methods that involve everybody and are focused on the end result. We teach a 1-day introduction and a 2-day immersion workshop in which you'll get to experience over half of those structures. If you want to change the nature of the way your organisation runs meetings, this could be for you.
Michelle Parry-Slater, in the series sponsored by the Charities Learning Consortium, is looking at L&D in the third sector. And today she's talking to Kevin Williams of the Fostering Network.
This month on Learning Now TV, we're talking to Kevin Williams. Now, he is CEO of the Fostering Network, and he has a really good view on what corporates can learn from the third sector, which of course is what this whole series is all about. I personally think there's a lot for corporates to learn. Let's hear from Kevin. So Kevin, your view is corporates have got lots to learn from the third sector. What is it specifically that we can learn in learning and development from you guys?
So I think that quite often corporates focus on the need for their bottom line. That's their raison d'etre. That's what they're
That's
there
what
for.
we're there for, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think at charities, people forget that actually we also have to run as a business and we have to focus on the bottom line as well. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're delivering corporate social good. We have to make sure that our beneficiaries are receiving a service from us. And that leads to a whole range of complexities. It's complex in terms of the way that our funding arrangements are focused. So from long-term grant funding to short-term grant funding, from a mix of commercial activity and for us at the Fostering Network, a membership income. So I think that whole diversity of income means that we have to really focus on the business of the organisation, focusing on the bottom line to make sure that we're going to exist into the long term. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we meet our public good. So for us, that's about improving the foster care system, making sure that foster carers and the children they look after are supported as best that they can.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is that actually corporate organisations are focusing perhaps on one thing. Maybe their income stream is not as diverse as yours, but actually you can focus on that diversity. I'm thinking about companies being a little bit more agile. That's the word of the year, isn't it? It's the word of probably this decade. But you've already doing this already in organisations. So obviously for Learning Now TV, we're interested in what we can learn and how your learning development teams can support your organisation. Talk me through then, how do you deal with that diversity of income? How do you deal with teaching people that, you know, today we're going to get some income from members and where we can spend that, but actually you don't necessarily have long-term learning plans for your staff, or am I guessing wrongly? Talk me through what that looks like from a learning perspective.
Yeah, so I think for our staff, the first thing we have to do is to make sure that they are competent and compliant and good, excellent in terms of the jobs that they do and the specialism.
How do you do that? You don't know where your money's coming from in 6 months' time or a year's time?
Sure, so the specialism in which they deliver, so a marketing person, we need to make sure that they're the best possible marketing that they can be. Our comms and communication people, the best possible comms and communication strategy that we can have.
And that's tricky, isn't it? On third sector wages.
That is a challenge. But I think that one of the jobs around is making sure that we become financially literate. And I think historically, lots of charities would have delivered programmes and projects that were grant funded, and then they would have ended. And what I saw was a range of projects which were coming to an end, and then a new grant application. And
so
that
new
meant
direction?
New direction sometimes. And often that meant, I think, people were on fixed term contracts and some of those issues which weren't helpful in terms of workforce strategy. I think increasingly organisations are using grant funding as prime pump funding to then think about what can we convert this into a commercial activity. So for us, we run a specialist programme called the Mockingbird programme, which is a way of structuring and supporting foster carers, which we started with grant funding from the Department for Education Innovation Fund, but increasingly we've converted that to a commercial model
so
that
it becomes
more sustainable
exactly.
in the longer
that's the
term.
Word. And that's no different, is it? From a corporate organisation, they need to think about sustainability, and from a third sector organisation, even more so. So I think there's some learning there. How have you made your learning sustainable?
So because we're now able to focus into the future, to begin to have 2 and 3 and 4 year plans, we're able to think around what are the learning and development needs for us as an organisation. I think the other thing that charities historically have not been very good at is making sure that their staff are financially literate. So a large proportion of our work has actually been focused on our staff becoming financially literate in order that they can understand the issues around business planning and business development and strategy development in order to make sure that the organisation is sustainable into the future. And when we're running programmes, we think all the time from the very beginning, what is the life cycle of this programme and what is its legacy in terms of converting potentially to a more commercial minded approach.
It's a really, really good lesson for the corporate sector, because I think you're absolutely right with regards to that financial literacy. Do I understand when I'm spending my corporate budget what actually it takes to get money in to spend that in the first place? And that financial literacy runs across all elements. So, you know, how much does it cost for HR? How much does it cost for even the finance team to be in the building? there's a lot of hidden costs, which I think when you're a third sector and you're really itemising every line item, then you're a lot more acutely aware of.
Absolutely, and as a result of that, we try to use our resources as the best we can. So people have talked around agility. You know, I think one of the things for us as an organisation is we try to make sure that our workforce is much more agile, because having a building in central London has a cost to it.
Yeah.
So thinking around what's the best use of that building, for example, how do we use that resource as best we can, and at the same time, how do we make sure that our staff are agile, get the right support, have the right IT connections in order that they can do their job from a variety of areas, because as a UK-wide organisation, we have to make sure that we meet a UK-wide need, but we can't afford to have offices based everywhere in the UK.
Yeah.
So a spend on improving our IT services means our workforce can be more agile. A lot of our work actually is out in the communities, is out with our fostering services and our foster carers. So important to think around how do you build a sustainable programme of investment into the right areas that supports the workforce. One of the ways that we've done that in terms of learning and development is through our Charity Learning Consortium investment, because through that we know that our staff can pick on a variety of topics that focus on management, on that financial literacy I've talked about, on the specialism of the area of work that they develop in.
It's great to get our sponsors of this segment into the whole piece. Thanks very much, Charity Learning Consortium. What we've heard today from Kevin is that there's lots of factors in a third sector organisation which are more acutely focused than perhaps in a corporate. You know, if you're one person in L&D and you work in a huge organisation and you feel like you're a cog in the machine, just perhaps think a little bit more carefully. If you were in a smaller organisation, would I spend that little bit of money? How would I get the best out of my L&D? How would I understand the impact of that bottom line? It's been really great talking to you today, Kevin. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Studies have shown that learning programs are now crucial weapons in the fight to attract and retain talent. Working closely with modern learning organisations across the globe, we have developed Learning Programs of Excellence, a prestigious award recognising exceptional, state-of-the-art learning programs. If you're a learning department or function, LPE will help you attract new talent. You'll boost your appeal as an employer by showcasing the calibre of your learning programs and development opportunities within your organisation. If you're a provider of learning, LPE gives you an absolute guarantee that your learning programs are capable of creating a lasting positive effect on performance and business outcomes. Get in touch with the Learning and Performance Institute now and begin your Learning Programme of Excellence journey.
I'm delighted to welcome our next guest onto Learning Now Television. Christine Locker is an author, coach and learning consultant, a polymath, if you will. And we've known each other for a little while now, and I'm delighted that she's come on today to talk a bit about her recently published book, and also to keep the theme going, some of the things that we've seen cropping up as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic across learning and development. Christine, welcome.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here. I mean, you know, here in the bigger sense, obviously, given where we are.
We have a virtual here now these days.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your book? Because it was published in 2019, right?
Yeah. So it was essentially, I basically wrote the book I wish I had had when I was a little earlier in my journey and when I was a little bit younger, and it didn't exist. So I thought, you know, after taking a few steps myself, I thought I should probably write it in the hope that it would be helpful for someone else. And what it essentially does, it's the sort of stuff I would do with a coaching client that's looking to make change in the first couple of sessions. So some of the things we tend to touch upon. It goes into kind of different areas of life and how well somebody feels in them and how they kind of interact with each other. It goes fairly deep into values as sort of first principles or key anchors that really bring depth and bring in the ultimate things you really care about as a person. And then the book goes very much into, okay, now we've got that. how do we actually make it practical? Because I find a lot of people, you know, you go deep, you have insights, you kind of make discoveries, and I think times of crisis are particularly key for that. And then you're like, okay, but now what?
And how much of it comes down to habit, do you think? Because, you know, I mean, just basic things like I've decided to go onto the wagon for a bit and just say no to alcohol. But actually what I found after a month is it's become more of a habit to say no, and it just gets easier. So it's almost like a muscle that I've had to build and then exercise. Is that the same with some of this behavior change stuff? Because it can be quite big. So breaking that stuff down, I imagine, is the tricky part for most people.
I think it is. I think it is. And that's why I like to focus on things like decisions. Because, you know, like a really big change is, okay, where do I start? But then, you know, how do I structure my day? What do I spend significant chunks of time on? You know, if I say I want to focus more on X, do I really want to, you know, hit the snooze button 6 times and be on Twitter for the first hour each morning? Or maybe do I want to do something else? And then maybe start making changes that way. And I think some of it is also about, you know, a lot of our lives really run on autopilot. I mean, maybe until March, and then some of it had to flex a little bit. But, you know, we meet similar people, we do similar things, we go to similar events. And then it's really hard to make changes because there's no space, you know, like that new thing needs actually somewhere to go. And it's also, you know, the new thing is not that stable yet. So it will feel clunky and awkward compared to everything else. So you're basically comparing the tiny little new seedling thing you're trying to build with a life you've been practicing for the past 20 years or 30 or, you know, whatever long time. That's really well rehearsed and fully polished. So that new tiny little thing is never going to look as good at that point in time. So it's really about kind of protecting some space for it to grow. And not everything will work the first time, but, you know, kind of really making those steps and trusting it and testing it and allowing it to be a little bit, and also to see what it actually wants to be. Because sometimes we have an idea and then we go out there and it might turn into something else, and that's actually really great, and we could not have worked that out on paper. So you also need to just do the doing, and that way live into the new thing. You can't just work it out on paper in your own head.
And are you seeing the COVID-19 pandemic, are you seeing that have an impact? Are you seeing like people or clients, you know, reassess their values, whether as an organization or individuals? Because obviously we've had this massive change thrust upon us. You know, how are you seeing that play out?
I find it super fascinating, I have to say. I mean, obviously, you know, the whole situation was horrible. And you know, if we had any sort of say in it, nobody in their right mind would have engineered it that way. But, you know, given what it is now, I think what's really fascinating is it forces both people and organizations to prioritize, because it's really clear out of those 10 things you can maybe do 1 or 2, but then what are the 1 or 2? So that's really helpful to kind of cut through the fluff.
And what are you seeing transpire in terms of those priorities? Because, and Flossway research would back that up. You know, we're seeing like there's a kind of a shopping list always of what people would like to be doing, but you know, this has really sharpened the focus in terms of the nice to have. To quote my friend Dr. Hannah Gore, who was on the show the other month, versus the must have.
I think people are rediscovering e-learning, and I mean e-learning in a very, you know, as a very big umbrella term. And they're also rediscovering it for their own lives, which I think is fascinating. You know, people who like 6 months ago probably would have been like, oh, you know, whenever you say e-learning, they would, you know, have a specific face that they'd be wearing. And now they're doing, you know, morning workout with Joe Wicks. Their kids do all sorts of stuff. They're learning a new language. They're looking up knitting patterns on YouTube, and and it seems to work, and it seems to be meaningful. And they're experiencing that as a more normal integrated part of just, you're human, you want to find something out, you want to get better at something, and that's one of the ways you can do it. Basically, I think there's a lot less drama and ideology in that conversation. I really like that.
Is there a jarring between almost how we've adapted to some of this e-learning in its broadest sense in our day-to-day, in our personal lives, and versus how it's done at work?
Yes. So I'm looking up, I'm imagining I'll be struck down by lightning in about a second. Because, we've obviously turned it into an industry, which is literally where we are working, of course. So, but I think we're sometimes making it much bigger than it actually is. And I think that can really confuse people, because then it becomes, you're like the 17th level of detail with functionalities and all sorts of other things, and people just, you lose people that way. And obviously that all needs to be worked out if you want the stuff to work. But I think just going back to basics, really. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What is it you're trying to do? And what would be most helpful to do that? And I think the current situation also has allowed people to be more creative, and this whole make, do, and mend, but like in a cool way. Nobody probably needed another catalog, even though people might be, stockpiling and panic buying and so on. But very often I find it's really maybe it is the literally homemade video from one of the leaders, for 3 minutes that does something.
I think that is inspiring, actually, and I think there's a lot for me to reflect on from that. So, as always with our conversations, Christine, thank you very much. Just give your book a quick plug. Where can people get it, and what's it called? Because I haven't got a physical copy. Normally, if we were in the studio, I'd have a copy to hold up.
Well, also it is an ebook, so you would have to hold up an iPad. It is the perfect length for what it needs to be, which is why it's an ebook, because it doesn't quite fit into the regular, So basically, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Values-Based Career and Life Decisions That Make Sense. If you type in my name, Christine Locker, and values, it should pop right up. And it's available in English on Amazon on all the international sites.
Perfect. Christine, thank you very much for your time today.
My absolute pleasure.
Well, that's it for this month. Well, really, the first half of this month, because we'll be back again in the middle of August. So, are there any events, anything you want to tell us about, Kate? Any news that we should be aware of?
Well, we're still in a kind of weird zone where events are concerned. So if there are any event organisers out there planning any virtual, conferences or meetups in the next few months, do let us know, because there's not a lot on the horizon at the moment. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty, obviously, around all of that. But we do have some exciting news in that Dr. Hannah Gore, who was on the show a couple of months ago, is joining us as a regular contributor. So look to see more from her on our next show.
Excellent. Yes. So I really enjoy listening to younger people who are coming into L&D. Don't you, Kate? I think it was a good idea to talk to people who are in the 30 under 30, and we'll continue to do that. I think it's very, very interesting, and we should be celebrating the young blood, if you like, the people who are going to be around for a while.
100%. So I mean, Georgia is the same age that I was when I got into L&D, and she came up to me at an event in February, obviously before lockdown, so confident, introduced herself. And you know, the 30 under 30 that we've talked to so far, and we've got lots more in the pipeline, they've got a great take. And I think it's really important for all of us. You know, we talk about learning obviously all day long, but that kind of reverse mentoring and you know, but from people who aren't maybe jaded or haven't been too impacted by certain things in their career, I just think it's super inspiring, and it gives me lots of hope for the future.
I completely agree with you. And if you don't have young people coming through, we're all doomed anyway. And they're having to confront things that you and I never had to confront. And they're rising to the challenge. I think there's some fantastically interesting work being done at the moment, and a lot of people rising to the challenge of lockdown and realigning organizations and really pushing themselves forward, pushing learning forward, because it's certainly one of the ways that problems get solved and organizations get transformed. So it's actually very important that we celebrate that and share their success. So that's terrific, Kate. Well, see you in a couple of weeks.
See you on the 27th.
Indeed.